Chapter 1066, Method of Enhancing Strength. Two of the world's most advanced battleships were dropped right in front of the shelter. Zhang Yi had the crowd return inside the room. Zhou Qi, along with Yang Xinxin and Liang Yu, saw that everyone else had gifts, and although they didn't say anything on their mouths, they were more or less a little unhappy in their hearts. Even Flower had gotten a precious reward like the source of God. They would definitely feel unbalanced. Zhang Yi certainly wouldn't favor one over the other. Nowadays, everyone in the shelter was like his family. Maintaining the harmony of a small family must not be unfair. He said, "This time when I came back, I actually prepared gifts for each and every one of them. And it was a very valuable kind of gift, oh." These words instantly made everyone curious. Even Yang Xia put down the kitchen knife in her hand and looked at Zhang Yi with an expectant face. Zhang Yi said, "In addition to the source of God on the island, there is also a companion energy substance. Although this substance cannot help one break the limitations of their genes, it is the purest energy that can enhance one's strength." As he said that, he reached out and took out one transparent jar after another from among dimensional space. Among the jars, one source elf after another was sealed. After landing on the island, Zhang Yi had the advantage of being a forerunner, so of course, it was impossible for him not to know about the existence of a substance like the source elf. Therefore, when he hunted other mutants, he had collected quite a few along the way. With the presence of Ham Lele, finding these trinkets was not difficult for him. This kind of stuff, after absorbing it, can make you guys stronger. I will distribute them according to each person's ability. Zhang Yi briefly introduced the usage of the source elf, and then distributed these things to everyone. Even Lele got a share. It excitedly took the origin elf in its mouth and bounced around the room, almost breaking the ceiling. Liang Yu, Yang Xinxin and Zhou Qi got the most portions. The others were second. Once the source elf was in their hands, everyone was able to sense that throbbing from the depths of their souls. It was the most origin energy of life, and when they got the origin elf, it was as if a hungry person got food, creating the most instinctive urge to absorb it. This thing must be very precious, right? Liang Yu swallowed a mouthful of saliva. She had gotten the largest number of source elves. Zhang Yi said indifferently, "It's all right. It's just enough to make those captain-level mutants fight for their heads on the island. Mutants above 9,000 points of the supernatural ability index will become less and less effective when they use it. For Flower and I, they're almost useless. But for you guys, it should be quite effective." Zhang Yi spoke casually, but everyone listening could understand how precious these source elves were. "Zhang Yi, thank you." Liang Yu thanked Zhang Yi from the bottom of her heart. Zhang Yi spread his hands. Words of thanks are not only to be said, but things to be thanked are also to be done. Oh. You all need to become stronger so that in the future, no matter what kind of changes we encounter, you will have enough strength to deal with them. Zhang Yi still had great expectations for the people inside his family. Uncle Yu and Fatty Sue were also Delta-level mutants nowadays. Regardless of whether they could fight or not, well, they could at least play some role in any situation they encountered in the future. As for Liang Yu, Zhang Yi had deep expectations for her. Such a martial arts master, after possessing great power, was definitely Zhang Yi's right-hand man by his side. If it wasn't because he was worried that she was too strong to surpass himself, Zhang Yi would have given her that source of God to use in the first place. Yang Xinxin's ability was the rule system, which was extremely perverse and had a very large upside space ability. The key was that she was multi-intelligent and close to a demon, and was Zhang Yi's important military advisor. And Zhou Qi's medical ability was also important. This kind of profession, doctors, was often the ones who didn't want to touch on weekdays, but could save lives when it mattered. Of course it had to be enhanced desperately. Yang Xia received less rewards, and that was only relative to the others. She was Zhang Yi's quartermaster, which was important, only the importance level was slightly later. As for Auntie Zhou Haimei, well, she wasn't a mutant, and she didn't have anything missing on weekdays. In addition to living supplies, the spiritual level, Uncle Yu also gave her a proper arrangement, do not need Zhang Yi to worry about. So Zhang Yi came up next to Uncle Yu and said to him, "It's not easy for Auntie Zhou to take care of everyone on weekdays, except that she's not a mutant, so I don't have anything extra to give her. Don't reward her with anything in the open, reward her with something in the dark." Uncle Yu immediately understood, and an old face unexpectedly revealed an embarrassed smile. He nodded vigorously, he, good, I understand. Zhou Haimei, who was not far away, couldn't help but blush when she heard this. After Uncle Yu had absorbed the fragment of the source of God, his already robust physique had now become even stronger. Looking at the happy expressions of everyone in the family, a warmth was also welling up in Zhang Yi's heart. The people outside could not be relied upon. Xujing or Deng Shintong, even by Li Changqing, was likely to disagree with Zhang Yi due to interests. After the series of events during this period of time, it made Zhang Yi think about many things. He definitely needed to have his own power. It didn't need to be particularly strong, but it wasn't so strong that he would still be in a lonely situation when he needed a partner. At the very least, the people at home would not hold him back. Zhang Yi, what was with those people in the room? Curious, Zhou Qi asked why Zhang Yi had brought back the 3 Ludai people. Zhang Yi didn't hide it and directly told everyone the reason for bringing them back. Ludai has also mutated nowadays, and he hasn't experienced what we experienced before. I think that it's worth studying. So bring him back for observation. Zhang Yi's arms crossed, and after a slight pause, his tone became a bit deeper. Moreover, Chen Jingwan's seat, I think it's time for a change. When the crowd heard this, they couldn't help but ponder in their hearts. Yang Xinxin smiled faintly and looked at Zhang Yi. His strength is no longer enough to support a huge base, right, brother? Zhang Yi nodded. That was indeed the case. Tianhai City's sea defense is very important, and all the threats we face in the future will mainly come from the sea. Continuing to let a Gamma-class mutant hold down the fort, I don't feel at ease. Therefore, I want to promote a group of newcomers to the top. After this operation, the countries surrounding the East Sea, including the Colombian Navy, would hate Zhang Yi with a passion. The possibility of them coming to retaliate could not be ruled out. Even the people of the East Sea region couldn't completely drop their guard. This Ludai fellow has guts and is also very smart. If he adds that little bit more strength, I think it's not impossible to cultivate. Chapter 1067 Ludai's Ability. Ludai had shown amazing wisdom and vigor when he was at sea. Using his own means to turn the tide against the wind, he defeated the ship's stowaway alliance. Once this kind of person gained power, becoming the leader of a party would definitely not be a problem. Zhang Yi admired him, and if he really had the strength, he could be completely promoted. Fatty Su clasped his obese stomach with both hands and said with a serious look, "But this person, can he be relied upon?" Zhang Yi asked rhetorically, "You were talking about his loyalty?" Fatty Su nodded, "That's right, after hearing what you said, I think this person is quite ruthless. It doesn't feel very controllable." Zhang Yi laughed, "Stupid people are not good to control." He was a very smart person, then loyalty or not doesn't matter. He did not expect anything from the so-called humanity. Loyalty was nothing more than dedication to gain maximum benefits. Loyalty was worthless as long as there were enough bargaining chips for betrayal. He's not stupid, then as long as I'm strong enough, his loyalty will remain. Which of the several bases in Tianhai City was not subdued by Zhang Yi? At first, they were eager to destroy Zhang Yi's shelter, but as a result, aren't they all very honest now? Fatty Su smiled and scratched his head. "You're still smart, boss, and you have a different perspective on things." Zhang Yi glanced at him without any good humor. "You are also a Delta-class mutant now. Do you want me to give you a base to run things?" Fatty Su sniffed, his face sweating in fear as he shook his head repeatedly. "But don't. It's not like I'm that piece of material, it's really troublesome to manage something. Which is comparable to now, having food and drink, and playing video games every day." Zhang Yi let out a long sigh. There were times when he really envied Fatty Su, living a carefree life. There's nothing to do and you can still go to Blizzard City to do some horseplay, right? Zhang Yi said teasingly. Fatty Sue stole a glance at the others in embarrassment. The women inside the house snickered at this. Although they didn't say anything on their lips, they still had some inner contempt for Fatty Sue's behavior. Fatty Sue mumbled, I that was also for the sake of cultivation, to sharpen my will. His voice was getting smaller and smaller, and Zhang Yi didn't expose him. We were all men, some things were just clear in our hearts, and Fatty Sue couldn't be blamed for that. If you really have a favorite girl someday, bring her back. For my sake they will release them. When the time comes, you can have a house built independently for you. Zhang Yi didn't mind Fatty Sue finding true love outside. It's just that when the time comes, they will definitely have to split the house. After all, Zhang Yi still has a cleanliness fetish in this area. Unlike Uncle Yu and Auntie Zhou, who had a large age difference with Zhang Yi, living together did not seem awkward. When Fatty Sue heard this, he immediately sat on the sofa and said with a straight face, No, boss. I figured it out a long time ago and won't be looking for a girlfriend. Anyway, at a time like this, there's no one urging me to get married, not to mention that I don't have to think about having children. Why would I want to find one alone? He held up a finger and said with the look of a man who had been there before, When you have a girlfriend, you can only have one girlfriend. But if you don't have a girlfriend, you can have countless girlfriends. Fatty Sue's rousing this crooked reasoning left everyone dumbfounded. Zhang Yi nodded, reasonable. It was. After Fatty Sue was hurt by Lily Sue, he was considered to have no illusions about love at all. At this time, he was very open-minded, and it was enough for him to make a trip to Blizzard City to experience a little bit of life if nothing else. The kitchen side is still preparing the banquet. Zhang Yi thought Ludai 3 people have been waiting for a long time, and then hang them out to look like they are not polite enough. In the past, he was also a gentleman with status, so he still had to pretend in front of his little brother. He stood up and left the others to study the wonders of the Source Elf on their own before going over to talk to the 3 Ludai people. Zhang Yi pushed the door and walked into the room. The 3 men wolfed down everything they ate on the table, looking woefully out of shape. Their bodies and beards were covered with food scraps, living like they were beggars. Zhang Yi laughed. The 3 men were a bit embarrassed, and hurriedly stood up to greet them. Mr. Zhang. Thank you for your hospitality. Zhang Yi reached out and gestured for them to sit down. It's fine, sit down and chat. He then asked Yang Xia to send over some more food. The 3 people squeezed on top of a sofa, their expressions very formal and at the same time with strong expectations. If Ludai wasn't old, he would have wanted to kneel down and say to Zhang Yi, Mr. Zhang Yi, I heard that you don't have a son, I want to retire for you. Zhang Yi looked at the 3 people in front of him and calmly asked, Is Ludai the only one who has awakened his supernatural abilities? Rong Lei and Yu Gang nodded with some regret in their eyes. They hadn't awakened their supernatural abilities, which meant that it was impossible for them to have any great future in Chaoyu Base. Zhang Yi nodded, then opened the dimensional gate and took out the corpse of a mutant from inside. This supernatural was a member of the mutant team from Scylla, probably a disciple of that spider demon or whatever, and his ability index wasn't high, just over 5,000. However, Zhang Yi put him away out of the habit of cleaning up the battlefield. Zhang Yi placed this person's corpse in front of Ludai, then said to him, Try putting your hand on his head and see. Ludai saw this corpse and didn't understand why Zhang Yi wanted him to do that. Still, he honestly did as he was told. As he placed his right hand on the corpse's head, Zhang Yi's eyes were also carefully staring at his reaction. Suddenly, Ludai's eyes widened as a hot current quickly surged into his body along his arm. It was an indescribable feeling, and in an instant, his body was filled with power, as if something was rushing amongst his veins. The powerful strength dissipated most of the exhaustion in his body. A satisfied look appeared inside Zhang Yi's eyes. Your luck is good. Ludai indeed possessed a talent above Delta, which meant that he had the value to be cultivated. Ludai only felt a sense of relief after absorbing the corpse's origin. Of course, he understood that this was a gift given to him by Zhang Yi. The understanding Ludai immediately knelt down in front of Zhang Yi, his head dang. The head knocked on the ground with a sound. Thank you, Mr. Zhang, for your promotion. I, Ludai, will definitely serve you with my liver and brain in the future. Ludai was a smart man. He knew that Zhang Yi had given him this opportunity and must seize it. This could be the beginning of his turnaround. Zhang Yi smiled faintly. He vaguely saw some shadows of his once cautious self in this man's body. Just be clear in your own heart, follow me well in the future, you won't be treated badly. Chapter 1068, The Great Mutation Era. Zhang Yi reached out and pulled Ludai up. You're dirty, go over and take a shower. Let's talk about the rest after the bath. Zhang Yi led the three of them to the bathroom in the back, and then threw them a clean new outfit. The three of them walked into the 50-square-foot bathroom and took a long-lost hot shower, then changed into brand-new clothes. Xujing and Ronglei excitedly said to Ludai, Big brother, we're going to be rich in the future. By following Mr. Zhang, we'll be able to walk sideways in the entire Tianhai city in the future. Ludai looked at his two Muggle brothers, and although his heart was joyful, his face did not show too much excitement. Mr. Zhang promoted us, that's because I'm a mutant now and have that value. But in case we don't do well in the future, people can always replace us with someone else. Therefore, we have to work even harder in the future so that Mr. Zhang can see our abilities. He took a deep breath and raised his head to look at the bright ceiling. I must consider if this is the only chance I have in this life to change my destiny. Ronglei and Xujing nodded in deep thought. Zhang Yi was outside, and called over Zhou Ke, then said to Zhou Ke, draw blood for a lab test for those few people later. Take a look at how their physique is, and whether those two next to them have the potential to become mutants. Zhou Ke sniffed and realized what Zhang Yi was planning. You want to see their potential? But currently, we don't have such advanced technological means. Zhou Ke spread her hands to express her helplessness. Although she was highly skilled in medicine and quite knowledgeable about biology, she really wasn't very good at researching the field of mutants. After all, this kind of emerging science research often required large organizations that focused their efforts on it. Let's draw some blood and take a look, and I'll go to Blizzard City to ask Deng Shintong about it later. Zhang Yi said. Ludai's potential was definitely above Delta, and there was also a very small probability that it was above Epsilon. Although it was a small probability, the person Zhang Yi decided to use must have the other party completely in his hands. This was the only way to avoid being revolted in the future. The three of Ludai washed up and changed into new clothes. However, after years of being exposed to the wind and sun, it was still difficult to change their dark-skinned appearance, but they were just a bit fresher than when they first came to the shelter. Zhang Yi took them over to do a simple test of blood tests and physical abilities. The three people didn't dare to question anything and obediently cooperated with Zhang Yi to do all of them. Afterwards, Zhang Yi said, Don't go back to Chaoyu Base during this period of time, I'll take you to Qing Creeping Base for a while later. Doing so was to protect them. Qin Jingwan was not strong enough, and he had always had a strong sense of crisis. Now that Zhang Yi had brought Ludai back to the shelter, Qin Jingwan would inevitably become suspicious in his heart. If the three Ludai were sent back at this time, it was not ruled out that Qin Jingwan would kill them. Of course, Ludai and the three of them obeyed Zhang Yi's arrangement. At this time, the food inside the house was almost ready. Ludai could smell the aroma in the living room, and inevitably, they were a little haunted. Zhang Yi planned to eat this meal with his family, so bringing the three of them was a bit sudden. So he let Yang Xia and Zhou Hai Mei share a part of the meal and send it to them inside the hut, letting them eat alone. The three of them couldn't be happier. Today's meal was the most delicious meal they had ever eaten since the end of the world. Zhang Yi, on the other hand, was on the dining table with the people inside his family, and his joy opened the feast. Flower and Lele both had their own rice bowls as well. Only Flower sat on the table and ate with Zhang Yi, while Lele only had to squat beside the table to eat. At the dinner table, Zhang Yi told them about what happened above Star Island. Most of the episodes were just skimmed over, but when he mentioned the black-armored strange man he encountered later, Zhang Yi did mention a few more sentences. Everything was in my plan, except for that guy, which was a huge accident. Yang Xinxin couldn't help but frown slightly when she heard Zhang Yi's elaboration. This is very odd. She explained to the crowd, there are two conditions for a powerful mutant to appear. The first was having a high enough talent themselves, the second was getting enough resources to grow. Therefore, there is no lack of talented mutants in this world, but there is an extreme lack of powerful mutants. I don't know how many people with talent have died in the cold end times before they had the chance to show their strength. So far, the number of Epsilon mutants that exist in Huashu Kingdom is unknown, but it is projected to be only in the single digits. Columbia has the best biological technology, yet they have only managed to produce one Cardalus among their fleet. She voiced her own questioning. That black armored monster, then, possesses a staggering battle power of over 20,000 points. A weak nation like Star Island has experienced a widespread biological extinction event. How did such an existence appear? Zhang Yi said, I have also considered this kind of question, and the only explanation is that the source of God might have some abilities that we don't know about. Yang Xinxin nodded, perhaps, but to you, brother, wasn't the source of God just a key? Relying on the source of God alone would not be able to give one such great power, right? Zhang Yi spread his hands with a bitter smile, I'm not sure about this. Anyway, the real headache in this matter was the East Sea region and Columbia Ocean Fleet. Yang Xinxin lowered her head and murmured, there are too many secrets in this world. The source of God's appearance was a huge mystery, and the black armored monster you mentioned might be a huge mystery as well. I always feel that sooner or later, one day, we will have to face it all. Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows, maybe it was just a coincidence. Is it that serious? He especially hated troubles. Yang Xinxin, however, said to Zhang Yi seriously, brother, if a person does not have far-flung worries, he will have near worries. The present deist must consider all possibilities. After all, the end times was just the beginning, and it's far from over. Yang Xinxin's words reminded everyone. The global freeze was only the beginning of the plague, and after a year had passed, nothing had gone in the right direction. Instead, there was a multitude of unnameable disasters in this world. Humans seem so small in front of these unknown things. Only by being prudent, working hard to become stronger, and learning more about the unknown, could we survive in the end times. Zhang Yi poked the rice in the bowl with his chopsticks and said slowly, in that case, those guys in Blizzard City can still be of some use. They definitely have a lot of information that we don't know. Chapter 1069 Silent Changes. After finishing the meal, Zhang Yi returned to his room to rest. Yang Xinxin and Zhou Qir came to Zhang Yi's room, and they all took off their shoes and socks to sit around on the carpet. The main thing was to report to Zhang Yi about some recent movements in Tianhai City. Zhang Yi was usually lazy and didn't bother to take care of the other bases. Only Yang Xinxin and the girls could not be idle. Because they were usually at home, in order to show their abilities, they helped Zhang Yi manage the 3 major bases. Zhang Yi didn't ask about these things, so he let them do it, as long as they didn't interfere too much. The shelter didn't need them to provide any resources anyway. However, after listening to Yang Xinxin's words, Zhang Yi couldn't help but sit up and exclaim. It turned out that during this period of time, not only Zhang Yi was working hard, everyone was trying their best to progress in order to stay alive. After the 3 major bases had solved the basic problem of survival, they were all working hard to figure out how to restore order and to improve their living conditions. Over at the Qing Creeping Base, because of Li Jian's presence, their agriculture has developed very quickly. It has been established into a huge underground farm and can produce crops periodically. These crops are already able to maintain the basic needs of the Qing Creeping Base. Hearing the name Li Jian, Zhang Yi rubbed his chin. Old Lia is really a long-lost name. The ability that was once not too useful in Zhang Yi's eyes was not expected to play a big role nowadays. He couldn't help but think that if he could help him improve his ability, perhaps in the future, this guy alone would be able to solve the food crisis of many people. After all, Zhang Yi had quite a few seeds in his hands. the land was still fertile, only a few meters below the ground were frozen. The problem of sunlight was also able to be solved by ultraviolet lights. Although he is not a combat-type mutant, his abilities are somewhat top-notch when placed amongst the living category. Zhang Yi's current feeling was somewhat marvelous, rather like he was playing a wasteland infrastructure-type game, and Li Jian was the plug-in that was able to provide crops. Only, he didn't have that much of a mind to care about the deaths and lives of more than 10,000 people in the entire Tianhai city. Once he started dabbling in it, he wouldn't be able to get out of it later, and he wasn't going to ask for trouble. Let them decide how to develop on their side, we won't interfere. But occasionally call Li Jian to come over and help raise flowers and plant seeds is not bad. Zhang Yi said with a smile. Yang Xia was wearing a pink pajamas, sitting on the ground with her legs folded, her white and tender little feet slightly curled up, nodded happily and said, I was thinking the same thing, planting some flower inside the home is also a different view. And eating kin food every day, it would be great if we could get some fresh vegetables. Zhang Yi said to Yang Xinxin, Xinxin, I'll leave this matter to you to arrange. Just in time, I'll make a trip to their place recently and take a walk. Lest they cause any trouble. After resting, Zhang Yi went to the living room and found Lei who was resting on the floor. He reached out and grabbed the dog's ears and said with a smile, Hey, it's time to go back. Lei hurriedly stood up, woof. Zhang Yi asked, Did you want to go back, or stay here? Although Lei's combat strength was relatively average, it possessed an extremely sharp sense of smell, making it very suitable for reconnaissance in the middle of the battlefield. Considering this, Zhang Yi was still hoping to keep it at home. However, even if it was not willing to stay in the shelter, Zhang Yi could still borrow it every time he went out in the future. But it was always more fun to have a cat and a dog at home. Lei, however, said firmly, Boss, I still want to go back. My master is still waiting for me at home. Although the living conditions on Zhang Yi's side was good, the dog's loyalty to its owner would not change because of this. Zhang Yi was quite emotional, which was why he liked cats and dogs. More often than not, they were more trustworthy than people. Alright then, I'll send you back here. Zhang Yi called the 3 Ludai brothers, then called Lei to join him, intending to make a trip to the green creeping base. On one hand, he would leave the 3 people in Xingtian's care, and on the other hand, he would see how things were developing on their side. Opening the dimensional doors, it didn't take long for them to cross a distance of hundreds of kilometers and arrive at the Qing creeping base, which was located in the northwest of Tianhai City. Most of the boilers in this huge steel refinery were already out of action at this time. After all, the resources that could be used as fuel had pretty much been burned. The boilers that were still burning were also basically used for heating. When Zhang Yi and the others arrived at the Qing creeping base, Lei immediately tilted his head in excitement and woof woof. He shouted twice. When the people from the green creeping base saw Zhang Yi and the others, they hurriedly ran over attentively. Mr. Zhang. Quickly go inform the chief to come over, Mr. Zhang has arrived. Zhang Yi stepped into the green creeping base, which had changed a lot compared to the last time he was here. There wasn't much snow inside the factory, and there was only a thin layer on the ground. It was evident that it was carefully cleaned every day. The workers inside wore thick clothes and walked between the various plants in a well-organized manner. This Xingtian kid, he has also learned business management now? Zhang Yi couldn't help but be a little surprised. Not long after, Xingtian hurried over with a few people. Old Zhang, you're back. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Xingtian shouted at the people around him, warmly welcome the leader's visit for inspection. Everyone applauded. The surrounding workers were very naive and simple, clapping hard to greet Zhang Yi in the same way they used to entertain their superiors. Zhang Yi smiled and shook his head. Lei, I've returned it to you. It has made a lot of credit for this operation. Lei ran to Xingtian and rubbed his head affectionately. Xingtian somewhat chastised and patted the dog's head. Useless thing, you don't even know how to grasp such a good opportunity given to you. If you were to follow old Zhang, you wouldn't be eating and drinking every day in the future? Leilei's mouth let out a petulant whimper. I really can't do anything about you. Although Xing Tian said this on his lips, he was still very happy in his heart, which could be seen from the expression on his face. Zhang Yi asked, Old Xing, you've been managing this pretty well lately. Is there some high-ranking person guiding you? Note, Xing Tian, formerly known as Xing Weinan. Xing Tian laughed. It's really true that nothing can be hidden from your eyes. That's right, I was having someone high up here. He turned his head to look at his side. A somewhat short man walked over to him, all wrapped up in thick clothes and wearing a scarf on his face. When he walked up to Zhang Yi, he took off the scarf and smiled. Mr. Zhang Yi, long time no see. When Zhang Yi saw him, he immediately understood all of this. Ma Wenjing. So it was you. Chapter 1070, Preventing the Few. Zhang Yi brought back many people from Rockflow Island. Most of those people were wealthy merchants, officials, or fishermen like Ludai who went to Rockflow Island for vacation. In normal society, most of them were elite talents. Ma Wenjing, for example, was once one of the few big entrepreneurs. Having such a character manage a factory of several thousand people was indeed not a problem. Xing Tian said to Zhang Yi, thanks to these people you brought us, they are now managing the factory very well. It's much better than when I was there. Xing Tian was also a big old man and knew nothing about business management. However, the biggest advantage of him as a person was that he was self-aware, and he knew to hire professionals for the things he wouldn't do. Zhang Yi nodded. Let's go, let me see what your place looks like now. Xing Tian and Ma Wenjing led Zhang Yi and casually turned around inside the factory. At this look, Zhang Yi was quite surprised in his heart. Nowadays, all the various factory buildings were being utilized. The equipment for steel making was still functioning, and all that was being built was some production tools. There were also workshops responsible for making equipment to protect against the cold, such as clothes and hats. It was said to be made, but in reality, it was just a matter of remodeling the clothes that were picked up from around the area. Some of the clothes were stripped from the dead, while others were picked up from other warehouses or inside the mall. In addition, there was a workshop specializing in water supply, as well as a workshop for crop processing. Everything here was just like a small society. Zhang Yi couldn't stop nodding as he watched. I heard that all of this food, was Li Jian in charge of managing the production? He asked. Xing Tian replied, Li Jian is now our agricultural workshop director, haha. He is a really powerful character. With him, all our food problems have been solved. Zhang Yi nodded, originally wanting to go and take a look at the agricultural production there, but on second thought, he didn't have anything to ask Li Jian about, so he dismissed the idea. In short, as long as the people here could live self-sufficiently, that would be the best outcome. After briefly strolling around, Zhang Yi was very satisfied with the operation of the entire green creeping base. However, he still called Xing Tian to the side and instructed him a few words. The Qing creeping base is very good right now, but there is something that has to be said. Old Xing, you should be clear about how many kilograms you are capable of. Be careful of the people underneath clamoring for attention. Xing Tian froze for a moment. What takes over the master? Zhang Yi. He helplessly explained, that is to say, be careful of the people below you whose ability exceeds yours and take away your position in the future. In the past, everyone had a bad time, so they were willing to surround you. But now after life is on the right track, people will have greater ambitions. You have a lot of talent around you, and they were all more than capable in regular society. You yourself need to be careful of being taken out of power. Xing Tian nodded thoughtfully after hearing this, and his expression turned grim. What you said makes perfect sense. Now that I have Ma Wenjing and the others, I seldom care about the factory's affairs on weekdays, and I thought it would be easier this way. But if this continues in the long run, maybe I'll really be hollowed out. Yikes, Zhang Yi, you are just too smart. You said I didn't think of it. He slapped his head, his eyes shining straight up. Zhang Yi shrugged, this is the reason why I haven't wanted to manage your 3 major bases. People valued self-knowledge. Zhang Yi was prudent but did not possess the talent to manage a large organization. Even if he could manage it, he did not like this waste of his mind, spending days dealing with trivial matters as well as playing power games with his subordinates. Therefore, it was enough for him to just manage his own acre of land at home. Xing Tian was not as good as him, and looking at this appearance, being hollowed out in the future was basically 100% of the matter. It was only then that Zhang Yi gave him a slight mention. Xing Tian hesitated for a long time and asked Zhang Yi, "But, Ma Wenjing and the others are really quite powerful, they have taken care of the base in a well-organized manner. It's impossible for me to get rid of them." Zhang Yi said indifferently, "This is simple, the base can't let one person dominate. You train one or two more people up and let them compete with each other, slowly weakening Ma Wenjing's influence alone. And you should often give meetings to the people in the base to show your authority. Anyway, your force value is here, they can't make too many waves." Xing Tian nodded his head repeatedly as he listened. All right, I'll do as you said. In these few days, I'll have Ma Wenjing take a few days off first, then find someone else to do his job." Zhang Yi nodded. "You do that first. But Ma Wenjing must be very popular right now, and if you let him step down, it might cause dissatisfaction among the people underneath. If things get out of hand at that time, or if the replacements you find don't do a good job, you'll just step forward and deal with those people, and then at that time, you'll be able to pacify Ma Wenjing nicely and let him continue his work." Xing Tian nodded his head repeatedly as he listened, carefully memorizing what Zhang Yi said in his heart. "That's all I can tell you, if you don't manage it well yourself, there's nothing I can do. See how much you can comprehend on your own." Zhang Yi had said that he would generally not meddle in the operations of the three major bases. If Xing Tian couldn't manage the green creeping base well on his own, then he would be replaced by someone else sooner or later. At that time, Zhang Yi would not stand up to defend Xing Tian. All he needed was someone who could maintain the normal operation of the bases, and no matter who that person was, it didn't matter to Zhang Yi. After chatting about this, Zhang Yi talked about Ludai's three people. Let them stay in the Qing creeping base for a period of time. Xing Tian didn't need to care about them, he could let them work with the ordinary workers. Also pay attention to observe Ludai's changes. When he finished dealing with the basic situation in Tianhai City, Zhang Yi returned home. He opened dimensional space and took out the body of the already dead Morning Soul. Although it was a madman, the power was a solid epsilon. How strong should his origin be? Zhang Yi placed his right hand on his head, and soon, a huge power surged into his body. The sensation was wonderful, as if it washed away all the lead and allowed itself to be transformed. It was just as he thought, the living dead bereaved soul, the origin contained within his body, although it was crippled, it was still an epsilon-level origin after all. It was similar to the original Yuan Konghua back then. This power allowed Zhang Yi to gain some more strength. However, according to his estimation, by the time he fully absorbed this power, he would only be able to raise about 1,000 points of his supernatural ability index. This was not too far from Zhang Yi's estimation. But there was also one helpless thing. That was that from now on, it would already be difficult for Zhang Yi to get much of a boost from absorbing mutants below epsilon. Deng Shintong and the others returned to Blizzard City. Xujing had received the casualty report early on and was inwardly quite satisfied with the operation. After all, in the entire Jiangnan region, the only captain-level mutant to die in battle was Li Long. Next, the only thing that needed to be taken care of was Zhang Yi. Spirit Guardian came to the Commander-in-Chief's office in the combat center and reported the details of the mission to Xujing. After listening to it, Xujing frowned slightly and inquired somewhat nervously, "What kind of attitude does Zhang Yi have towards him?" "I mean his attitude towards me." Spirit Guardian was silent for a moment and replied, "He is very unhappy about this matter of you arranging for me to spy on him." Xujing let out a long sigh at his words, the worry in his heart increasing. "Then he didn't do anything to you?" Spirit Guardian replied, "He knew that I was the one you sent and didn't do anything to me." It was just that I was told to follow him around and not to report any information about the island to you while I was on Star Island. Spirit Guardian nodded. Commander Zhu, this was a mistake in my work. Xujing waved his hand. That's just it, you can't be blamed for this matter. After all, even I was counted in by him. Saying this, the corner of his mouth suddenly revealed a smile. But the fact that he didn't kill you is a good thing. It shows that there is still something to talk about. Spirit Guardian was silent. Regarding her life and death, Xujing did not care too much. She didn't tell Xujing that she had been injected by Zhang Yi with the truth-spitting agent, and had already told Zhang Yi all of Blizzard City's machinations.